we've talked about Charles, you've seen Charles. Orland is not only, can I speak from the heart, he is heart. He is heart. He is, I don't even know, I've been thinking about your introduction, Orland, and I'm speechless, honestly. I think of you as someone so deeply connected to Source and so deeply channeling Source. And that's who you are. It's just Source in this beautiful form. And I love you dearly. I love your work. I think of him as a shaman. He is a shaman on this planet who is transforming lives wherever he goes. So Orland Bishop, thank you for being here with us. So I happened to have a very brief opportunity yesterday to spend a couple of hours in their workshop that they came together and did here in Oakland. It was amazing. It was a full day. I was there for the first couple of hours. And in those first couple of hours, I think I took like 5 or 6 pages of notes, just listening to their wisdom and the wisdom in the group. It was all about, because this is the other thing that I really want to press on, is that there's a lot of brilliant speakers that are going to be on this stage the next 2 days. And that's great. And it's not about them. It's about all of us. And the brilliance that was in that room and the engagement in that room was amazing. And so it's about your engagement as well. And all that your experience, you have so much to give, every one of us. So I just want to make sure that we're really aware of how much we hold ourselves. But I have to say that the way you led, and it was just flawless and beautiful and organic and natural and authentic. And some beautiful pearls came out that I wrote down. And I'm just going to say a few of the pearls, and then you all just take it from there, okay? Is that all right? Is that all right? We're completely unrehearsed here. So one of the things that I know, Charles, you were saying, you were talking about transparency, that we're re-entering the age of transparency, and that transparency is the key to the healing of love and money. Their workshop was on love and money, and that's what this is. And that transparency is the key to the healing of love and money. Orland was talking, you all were talking about fear, some beautiful things, because fear being what is in the way. Like, what is in the way? And how much fear there is. That fear is this gap. And once we cross it, we have to create something. Once you cross that gap, now you have the opportunity to create something new. And that fear might be cultural, but the response to it is human. Orland Bishop. So, and the karma of money. You mentioned the karma of money, which I thought was really, I wanted to really dig down into that. So there's many things that you all said yesterday. I missed most of it, but these things stood out to me around love and money and where they live together, and how you mentioned it earlier today in your talk, Charles, how they feel like they can't live in the same place, love and money. And so I'm just going to pass the floor to you all and see if any of those things strike a bell of something you want to speak on or something else. But this conversation of love and money, if you can give that full day workshop in 20 minutes, that's what we want.
You should start by speaking already.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am very, very grateful for this invitation to come and be with you this morning. Konda, as you said, this space as a hub not only allows the opportunity for time to be a time and place where people come together, but I imagine that if we're to account for the time that's in this room, we have to do a different kind of calculation. Because it is often an assumption that because we're sitting in the same room, we're sitting in the same reality. And that is not always so. So in this room are people whose times, consciousness are working very differently. And as a result of that, different realities can emerge from that process itself. So how do we use time in a way in which how we engage it results in a different effect in consciousness? And time doesn't depend upon information. So we could sit here all day and gather information, and it falls mostly into unconsciousness. For one reason, is that the power that uses time is attention, attentiveness. And if my attention is not at a certain level of presence, of mind, but also, say, heart, I don't utilize what is given. I don't participate in the exercise of doing something in which reality depends upon my intention. And so we in our present field of opportunity is how do we design for this most powerful resource in our lives, which call time, so that it doesn't pass and fall into an unattentive consciousness. And so how do we always welcome the person and the collective into this faculty that I think is essential for our age? Because if we could recapture it in a different kind of exercise, we will break the scarcity boundary. Because money is not the problem, time is the problem. We don't organize for time to be effective enough. And particularly in our individual lives, we are engaged so much with the use of something that we could actually share more efficiently in the world. So if we say this conference day goes 8 hours, and I say, well, there are 200 people in the room, you just multiply that by 8. And that's how much time we have in the room. But how do we use that power? Or trust. What is trust? Trust would be, or the power of this collective would be the entire number of people multiplied by, we say, infinity to the power of trust. What is the currency that is most valuable here? It's not money. The currency for us is, can we trust to actually be in the same reality while we're here for this amount of time? And what does it take to do that? I think this is really where we were engaging this work. That the ideas of what we're trying to work for is wasting our time for money. I'm going to say it again. Wasting our time for money. You know, I think back in my ancestry, and several people mentioned slavery in this conversation this morning. And it may appear that those who were enslaved were not compensated for their work. And that has to say, well, who compensates whom? Where does the real compensation come from? For those people who were enslaved, they were compensated by their spirit. Meaning that their efforts to come into the reality that they were presented with created a soul consciousness that was projected in time. How far in time? Who knows? But I'm saying they created a reality that we haven't even begun to use yet. They didn't create money. They created consciousness. And many people inherited that consciousness. And so the possibility is still there. Where is our time consciousness for what people do really in the world? It doesn't always result in cash payment. It doesn't result in political position. It results in the soul being able to discover and create for itself a capacity that if we trust that level of the human life, we will shift this paradigm of scarcity. Yes, they should have been paid for their labor, but they didn't. And as a result of that, they had to compensate themselves. Who gives you your wealth? No one other than your soul when you really need it. This is initiation. Nobody is going to give you the most valuable thing, which is your inner reserve of will, that when you decide that the paradigm in which exploitation is over, what is there to stop your soul from speaking its truth? Our age requires this courage to step out of the mental model of the world, which is increasingly causing the conflict that we can't share reality because the mind cannot always know what the other person is thinking. But there's a power in love. And this is Ralph Waldo Emerson's words. There's a power in love to divine another's destiny better than that other can. And with heroic encouragement, hold him to his task. If we love each other, we will see each other's future and create from that. It does not take money. It will create money, but it doesn't take money. It takes the investment of intention that I will not allow you to waste your life and your time and your inner capacities for the agreement that requires this world to change. That's what our intention is for you.
I'm just going to comment on a few things that struck me in that. One is the idea of the deferred compensation for the labors of slavery. And we could add to that to all of the other labors following slavery in the era of Jim Crow, in the era of prison labor, and expand it even beyond to the vast labors of humanity that have for so long not seemed to serve the common good. But let's just stay with the labors of the slaves. So I'm seeing kind of like a wealth fund that ordeal has generated that is still untapped, which gives me a different sense of the motivation for social justice and even the reparations, which is not to, the motivation isn't actually equality. And it's certainly not to elevate people of color to an equal position in administering the world-destroying machine.
You guys did a good job with that.
Yeah, we've got that. We don't need your help to do that. Yeah. But but the motive can be an appreciation for what could be possible if this stored up wealth is tapped into. I often think that the leadership of a more beautiful world the political leadership will come from the prisons, because capacities have been developed in those circumstances that will be necessary. People who have lived for a long time knowing that they're in prison, unlike the majority of people who are the captors, who are under the illusion that they are themselves not in prison. Another thing I'll just speak to a little bit is what Orland was saying about time and attention, and how so much information is coming in and so many sense impressions. And he said that it goes, most of it, 99% of it maybe, goes straight into the unconscious. And if I asked you, could you please summarize what Orland just said? It's not easy to do that, or even to summarize what happened at this conference, because the attention is scattered. And when we scatter the attention, we experience scarcity. When you are giving full attention to somebody, there's no sense of the scarcity of time, in that, okay, I could be doing this, I could be doing that, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that, and not receiving the fullness of the experience. So Orland is speaking about the recovery of a really primal kind of abundance, the abundance of time, the abundance of attention, from which unlimited creative power is possible. And I'm thinking of the convergence of attention to hold a common story or a common vision. If we can do that, then the implements to make that vision a reality will be magnetized to that field of attention. So perhaps he's suggesting that in this gathering we can practice the recovery of that kind of that source of abundance. And I hope I have not done violence to your words by by interpreting them like this. But this is what happens with, when I listen to Orland. I'm actually challenged to hold my attention on what he's saying. I think I'm going to leave it at that. There will be a quiz afterwards.
So, what I'm hearing is this internally resourced abundance that you can't take away from someone. And particularly when I think about, going back to those who have been enslaved, that turning themselves inward towards their own internal abundance has created an inheritance for myself, for yourself, for those of us who come from those who have been formerly enslaved. And so I get that, and I think that that's a resource that, I'm aware of. I'm aware of the resources in my community. I'm aware of the joy that's in my community. And that comes from the fact that there has been this marginalization of other kinds of resources. And money is needed in those kinds of material resources are needed in our communities, right? And so where is the connection between that internal abundance that you're pointing towards and the manifestation of equity that's on the material plane? Is there a connection there?
So all currencies depend upon a design on the group psychology. So most currencies are intended to affect behavior, not to affect the value of goods and services. It's to decide how will people behave in creating goods and services. So it's to motivate people to do something with their will and collective consciousness. So currency at the meta level of a currency is a prediction of what would happen if people use this instrument and resource in a particular way. And so I would say that if a person wants to enhance their use of the dollar, they should understand their own psychology first. Because acquiring the dollar will change your psychology. Money determines behavior. And the more unconscious you have about the meta level of the design of the currency, means that as soon as you achieve a certain amount, you no longer can have your own will. Because the currency will determine your purchasing and your investment and your relational dynamics. It is not value neutral. It's intended to give you your values. And if you don't have your values secure in your own intention first, communities will suffer. The dollar is not designed to create community. The dollar is designed to create empire. So if you want to create an empire, you actually could do better with the dollar. Why? Because it has to oppress other forces. It has to, in a certain way, capitalize upon the weakness of others, and the vulnerability of others, and the unconsciousness of others, but more so, the resources of others, and get them to give their resources over to you. This is what the dollar and most fiat currencies are designed to do. And it's not that, sorry.
That's the current paradigm. We're reimagining another paradigm.
Not with the same currency.
Not with the same.
Not with the same. So this is the thing. We think we can control the design. I'm talking about the design. Charles mentioned it earlier. The design is for scarcity. The more scarce it is, the most powerful it is. We do not issue the currency. We borrow it. So if you're borrowing power, you're powerless.
And you have to give more power back.
You have to give more power back. At the end of the day, you have to give the power back with interest. Means you have to give it back with your own power attached to it. So how do communities give away their power? Mostly politically. We vote people into positions of power that have to, in a certain way, still borrow money. The government still borrows money. The government is in debt. So electing a government official doesn't mean the problem is solved, because they still have to borrow the money from the Federal Reserve. So what are we creating? More dependency. It might be smarter in a certain way of how long do you take to pay back the debt. That's negotiable. But if empire, the level of banking is an empire idea, to say, at this level, we have all the time in the world to wait for you to pay it back. But what are we doing in the meantime? Wasting our time trying to catch up with something that has infinity ahead of us. It doesn't care how long it takes to pay it back. They will take it back when the time is right for them, because that is the level of power the money system holds. The critical part is that it can be supplemented with consciousness to negotiate how time is used, and not the money alone. Again, this is the critical element in development. all development, human capacity development, but more so the ethical, social development, where we're not putting the pressure on each other to borrow outside of our power. We should borrow within the limitations of our social power, enhance our social agreements, then invest more. But without the social agreements, the dynamic of competition will still happen. And this is the breakdown element, is that the power changes the personal psychology. Because everyone wants to achieve the next level of power, but not share it. And this is an interesting step that we have to mediate by how we meet and how we converse around the real power that we're trying to invest in.
Wow. You see what I mean? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Are you all have, I'm waiting for the book about all of this, or something that, that is going to, I can learn more from. And are you all doing any more talks together, or this, what came here yesterday was kind of a spontaneous combustion, or?
We're in conversation about doing more. Yeah, we're in conversation about doing more engagements together, because I love his work very much and I love him very much. And so we know that time is going to design for us the opportunities to do so.
Beautiful.
But thank you for allowing me as well to be here
Let's
with
hear
you
it
today.
for Orland Bishop and Charles Eisenstein.